Hello and welcome to this digital broadcast on CGTN Africa. My name is Jerry Owilli and I'll be with you for the next couple of minutes as we take a look at the ongoing Africa Cup of Nations in Egypt. Now, the tournament has had some very interesting results so far, including Uganda's victory over the DR Congo, Madagascar's draw against Guinea, and Benin's draw against Ghana. Now, we have seen some very impressive performances from other teams like Burundi, who alongside Madagascar and Mauritania are featuring in AFCON for their very first time ever. The first round of group stage matches ended on Tuesday, and the second round began on Wednesday. All indicators point to a very interesting footballing period ahead. We have a derby involving East African neighbors Kenya and Tanzania on Thursday. On Friday, we have a clash pitting two-time winners Cote d'Ivoire against one-time winners Morocco. And on Saturday, five-time winners Cameroon will come up against four-time winners Ghana. For more on this discussion, I'm now joined in studio by Mr. Chris Sunday, a football analyst who is very well conversant with African football affairs. Welcome, Mr. Chris.
Thank you.
And just to begin with, what is your assessment of this tournament so far?
I would say we haven't seen the match goals that we were looking forward to seeing. But this is normal when at the beginning or at the initial stages of the tournament, when teams are still a bit more careful, not every team wanting to lose. So I think we'll see more goals as we continue watching more matches.
Oh,
yeah,
nice. And the debutant teams have given a very good show in this tournament. We are looking at Burundi, their performance against Nigeria. Yes, they lost, but you could see their performance was very, very good. We could see as well Madagascar in their game. They performed very well. Does this point towards an improvement in Africa's football?
I would say yes. And this is it's very important to know that the teams who are playing for the first time have really played well. And the idea is not sometimes to win a match. The idea is also to play well and leave touch some people in the way you play. So yeah, Burundi played well against Nigeria. They held Nigeria for over 70 minutes. Madagascar got a draw against Guinea. I think no one would have foreseen the draw against Guinea. Actually, Guinea had to come from behind to get a point. And Mauritania, in as much as they lost, they really played well. So I think this is an indication of growth in African football, but we also owe it to the expansion of the tournament from 16 to 24 teams.
And you're just mentioning the expansion of the tournament from 16 to 24 teams. And initially when the tournament began, the very first edition of the AFCON tournament in 1957 had only 3 teams. And it was until 1998 that they expanded it to 16 teams. And we had to wait again until 2019 for it to be expanded again to 24 teams. And do you think this is actually something that again points towards growth into, in the continent's football?
It really does point towards growth. Look here, before it was, confirmed that the AFCON will have 24 teams from 16, there were so many people who came out there and criticized the move. One of the reasons they were giving was the fact that it's logistically difficult to host a 24-team tournament. And they were also saying, maybe CAF has been pressurized by some powerful European clubs. But then Egypt has proved that it's possible to host a 24-team tournament. And on the other hand, when there are 16 teams in a tournament, technically there are 16 countries who are actively involved in the tournament. But when you expand the tournament to 24 teams, you're giving a chance to 24 countries, half of the continent, are now actively following the tournament. So I think generally the expansion of the tournament, it also unites the continent as a whole. Before, out of 56 countries, 40 countries had to feel left out. Right now, maybe CAF has to deal with 32. So generally, the expansion of the tournament is a good thing. UEFA did it from 16 to 24. They tried doing it in the World Cup. I think there were just some logistical challenges, but we are hoping that the next World Cup after the next one could have more teams. So I would say that this is a very positive improvement on African football.
And that is not actually the only progress that AFCON has made over the years. This edition is actually the first one that has been moved from the January-February window to the June-July window. Now, this was done for various reasons, and one of them was to make African football fall in line with international football, the international football calendar. Now, is this the right move for African football?
It's the right move. And also, similarly, there were a lot of concerns that were being raised, and one of them was the fact that during July, August, Africa tend to have it's more of a summer period, so Africa tends to have a lot of rainy seasons or extremely hot seasons. This is not a reason enough for me. One of the problems that have been solved by moving the AFCON tournament to June, July, initially during in January and February, European clubs were always having issues with African countries because the African countries have the right to call up their players, and FIFA allows them to call up their players. But then the European clubs will feel like in January and February, this is the moment when we really need these players. So it used to bring some form of tension. At one point, some European clubs decided to go slow on signing African players because you will feel like, why should I have this player from August to December, and then I lose this player in January and February at a time when maybe the team is starting to get exhausted. So it has addressed all these issues. I think it's one of the best decisions that CAF made, and it reduces all these conflicts with the European clubs. So for me, this is a very positive development in African football.
Yes, and so far in the tournament we have, apart from the opening game which was against Egypt and Zimbabwe, all the other games have not really seen the stadiums filled by fans. What would this be attributed to?
There could be several reasons. One reason, which I know is the main reason in my opinion, is just the cultural difference. The empty stadiums do not show lack of interest in football. They just show a different way of supporting football in the African context. We are used to watching football on screens. We are used to mainly like watching European football on screens. And so that is very difficult to change even when there is a tournament next door, because you still feel I can still watch this match on screen. So that in countries like, or let me say generally in Europe, a real fan, someone is considered a real fan when you travel with your team and when you go to the stadium to watch the team physically. There are people who get season tickets before the season even begins. So it's one of the reasons will be this cultural difference. The other reason, which I'm not sure if it affects this tournament, but we saw it in the last African Cup of Nations, was the issue of location. And I will give an example of a town like, if Kenya was to host, maybe we'll have a match in Kisii, but the match is between Tunisia and Algeria. And the people around the town feel like, why should we go all the way to watch a match between countries that do not relate with us in any way? The other one, which has really come out strongly, is the issue of fan ID. The process of processing fan ID it looks to be very hectic, but then you cannot access the stadium without the fan ID. This affected Uganda. There were Ugandan fans who had to be locked out of the stadium because the process of getting this fan ID is too long and too hectic. That will be another reason. And then going forward, these are issues that can be sorted out. In 2015, we saw CAF saying, okay, we don't have to build 60,000 or 40,000 capacity stadium. We can build 18,000, 10,000 capacity stadium so that at least the stadium is full, not to give an impression that the stadium is empty. So this is also a step going forward in not making it look like people are not watching the matches. But also, traveling fans are very few in the African continent. It's also expensive. Logistically, to move from one country to another to go watch a match, it's expensive. So unless you're a club official or you are subsidized by the federation or the country, generally it's very expensive. And lastly, maybe because the matches are taking place on weekdays and not everyone is on leave to travel and go watch these matches. But we expect better attendance as the tournament progresses.
Yeah. Nice. Now, we have seen some very positive stats for, for Africa's football giants like Nigeria. We have seen Algeria beating Kenya 2-0. We have seen Senegal winning by very impressively. But of all these big teams that have already recorded wins, which one has impressed you the most so far?
Senegal has impressed me the most. They played attacking football from the start. Nigeria played well. Morocco is actually my team at the tournament. They got a narrow win, but they played well. But I will put my money on Senegal so far. Cisse has been there for some time. He has built a team. He has a clear plan. And I think Senegal is going to, apart from just proceeding from the group, I will put my money on them. Yeah.
So do you think they will actually go all the way and win the trophy?
It's their time. They should. They have the talent. They play well. I always feel like a team should be judged by how well they play and not just the ability to grind out results. And also, Senegal has players who have the experience, but most importantly, they are the only country I've seen so far who play as a team. Yeah.
All right, and we have still seen a lot of logistical problems involving teams like Zimbabwe and Cameroon, who are actually the defending champions, so it's very sad to see. But will Africa ever see an end to such problems heading towards a continental tournament like the AFCON?
I wish we could. This is very embarrassing. Look at the Nigerian women team. They proceeded to the round of 16 for the first time in 20 years. When they got knocked out, they couldn't leave the hotel because they had not been paid bonuses. It happened with Nigeria in 2016 when they had to arrive at Brazil 7 hours before a match. They got stranded in the USA because the government could not pay for traveling arrangements. In the same year, you remember when money had to be flown on air to just pay the Ghana team. And you can't blame these players when they do these kind of things because they also feel like, hey, this is the only moment we can get this amount. We have a match in 3 days. Let's say we are not taking part in the match so that they can at least take us seriously. So from a player's point of view, you have to sympathize with the players. But I will say without any fear that this is just a sign of mismanagement and to some extent corruption, because it happens all the time. Why is it that when the players go to the extreme, this money is now readily available and the money is processed and can even be flown on a jet? So I think at the end of the day, it boils down to proper management of finance and trust, because when you make a deal with the players, in Zimbabwe, for the Zimbabwean players, they even have to take care of their medical costs, and you're out there representing your team. So what the government is trying to do is just to react in order to save face and to avoid embarrassment and not to be seen as jeopardizing a tournament. But at the end of the day, it boils down to corruption, mismanagement of funds, and lack of transparency. If we start being very open with our players and be transparent in the way we manage our finances, I think these are issues that will be sorted out. And it has, at this moment, it has portrayed a very bad picture of African football. I think this is the lowest we have ever got in regard to this.
Yeah, and moving on, social media has actually played a very important role in AFCON as it does in all other sporting competitions. But we see a lot of fans from teams that are performing very well, you know, coming onto social media to congratulate them. And in equal measures, we see a lot of fans from the teams that have not performed so well coming onto social media platforms to castigate them. But do you think social media is something that should be controlled going forward in football and in sport as a whole?
I would say no. I would say no and yes. No, because social media facilitates access to information, which is a basic human right, access to information. So no, we cannot control the way people use social media, because on the other hand, it's also the way they access information. But I would say yes, and this boils down to, you know, personal discipline, because these things affect players. What we say when a team loses affect players. Let me give you an example of a coach called Marcelo Bielsa. Is the current coach of Leeds United. He was once the coach of the Chile national team. And when they went for the World Cup, he ordered his players not to access internet or social media during the period of the World Cup. None of the players would communicate with anyone out of the training camp. He even went to an extent of denying them the chance to see their families and wives during this period, which probably was to the extreme. But you get his point. His point is that I need these players to concentrate on the next match. I don't want these players to read what is being said or written out there. So the idea is also to make it easy for our players to psychologically concentrate. In the Kenyan context, for example, I think it was to the extreme, and if our players could access what was being said, sometimes it doesn't come out the right way. So yes, we cannot control what people write and people say, but it's our own personal responsibility as people who support our teams not to go to the extreme and write or do things that can hurt the performance or the psychology or the emotions of our players. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your insights, Dr. Chris. That has been Mr. Chris, who is a football analyst, very well conversant with African football affairs, just giving us more insights on the ongoing Africa Cup of Nations in Egypt. Now, this has been our time. My name is Jerry Owilli, and we will continue giving you all the updates from the tournament as it continues all the way until the final is played on July the 19th. We hope that you will join us in the subsequent editions after this, and I hope to see you again in future editions. Thank you so much.